in Nashville, you said something else at the RD meeting that we ultimately got engraved on, these sand things we had back here and gave them out to every member in the group because, again, while you'll never see it this way, to the rest of us, it was a pretty profound statement. It was about time and money. You want to share it real quick?
Money comes and goes, but time only goes, which is so true.
Hello there, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Orthopreneurs podcast. I often say today I've got a friend, but today I've got two friends who are here. I hope they would consider me their friend. They're my friends. But we'll get into a lot of who these guys are. But I think all too often we have conversations about things we want in our lives and goals that we've set. And I've been a long time a fan of writing goals and having goals because if you don't know where you're going, any path will take you there. Well, today's guests really embody the idea of creating a vision and following through with it. And I think there's a lot to be learned from that. So welcome, Chris and Marty Trockel. I'm so thrilled to have you guys on.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
So for those of you out there who don't know Chris and Marty, I went to residency with both of them. Chris was a year ahead and Marty was a year behind. And the two of them, combined with Douglas Shaw, my partner, made life bearable through ortho residency. And I would dare say that I am proud to have been the fourth least problematic part of causing trouble in a residency behind. Although, Chris, I have to say, you really didn't cause a lot of trouble. You were pretty good. But I think Marty, Doug, and myself probably gave fits to a lot of the faculty members. And on behalf of all of those still in mental institutions receiving care because of us, I want to apologize in advance. The story I tell a lot of people is that the first time I interviewed at Nova Southeastern, when I was there that first night, and I met my future partner, Doug Shaw, he was interviewing at the same time as me. He was staying at someone's house that he knew who was already a resident, and it turned out to be Chris. And when the night was over, I had a car. My folks lived in Florida, so I had rented a car, and I said, I can give you guys a ride home. And in the little bit I got to know Chris that night, he had shared with me a vision of what he wanted in his life when he got out of residency and beyond. And I would argue literally to a T, the life you told me about, which was back in 2011, was when we interviewed. That life 13 years later, at least to an outsider, is exactly what you wanted when that happened. And we'll get into that a little bit more. But let's start here. Chris, if you want to start, just tell everybody a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you are, how you ended up where you are, and then we'll go to you, Marty.
I grew up all over the place. My father was a carpenter. We grew up moving around a lot just simply because my father could move us and he wanted to. And so I was able to get a little bit of a taste of many different parts of the country. But a lot of my childhood, I grew up in Washington State. I lived in Colorado, Maine, Vermont, Chicago, Hawaii. Well, I went to school in Hawaii and then Buffalo, New York. And then I went to residency down at Nova Southeastern for orthodontics. I met Doug. I went to school in dental school with Doug Shaw. He was one year behind me. And then Doug joined me down in Southeast Florida. And then Marty joined me the year after that. So Marty and I were able to overlap school there a little bit as well. Nice. And now I'm in Oklahoma. It's not a place where I would have imagined myself, but there was an opportunity and I took it and we've grown to like it here, actually. It's pretty nice.
Beautiful. Marty, anything you want to add to the story about yourself?
Pretty much the same childhood because, we're brothers. But I did my dental school out in UCSF and then joined down in Nova for residency. In Oklahoma, kind of interesting is if you take an average of, you plot a point on the globe of all the places we've lived, Oklahoma's kind of in the middle of it all. So it's kind of the average of everywhere we've lived.
Right on. Nice. Hardigan would be proud of you. Statistical analysis right here.
There you go.
There's so many really, really nice traits that we could talk about things that the common man, the common orthodontist says, oh, I'm like this, or, I'll give an example. Money really doesn't mean that much to me. You'll hear people say that all day long, right? I'm not about the money, right? You guys really aren't about the money. Like maybe I'm way off base, but, I think you two guys find happiness in your family, in your faith, in your day to day. But money's, I mean, you do fine for yourselves, but money is really not in any way, shape, or form a motive. I almost feel like with you guys, money is almost a detractor. Like the fact that money's in the equation is more of a problem than having money. Not if money wasn't in the equation, life would be even simpler. Or am I wrong here?
No, you're spot on with that. Truly, I've felt that as money comes, life feels more complicated for sure. And yeah, that's not been a motivating factor for where we are, what we're doing, or the way we live. Yeah, I think you're right. And I think the reason for that is because we really grew up without much money and we were happy. So we really have a good base to compare it to. Yeah.
Do you ever look back, either of you, at the life you now lead as orthodontists, and do you have to pinch yourself because it was was it even something you could have imagined when you were kids, or
No.
is it so far off the scale of imaginable? It would be like me saying, one day I'm going to do 300 consecutive pull-ups, right?
Yeah.
Like it's. By the way, for the record, he mentioned his dad. I remember you telling me about your dad being able to do his age in pull-ups.
Yep.
At
Yeah.
like what, 60 or 70?
Well, something like that. He's
I think it
still
was
at it. He can't
in
do
his.
his age
He
in
can't do
pull-ups.
his age anymore. When he was 50, he could do his age. No, he can't do his 70s anymore. He's
And
he's
now
like
his dad's
77.
87. He can only do 75 pull-ups.
But he's crazy about it. He can still do, I don't know, I'd bet 40 something pull-ups. Yeah.
It's unbelievable. But
Yeah.
the life you lead, and again, for those out there who don't know these guys, they live great lives. I mean, they don't drive Maseratis. They don't live in $10 million homes. You're not motivated by money, with one exception that I'll bring up later on. But growing up as kids, I remember you said you're both members of the Orthopreneurs RD group, and I remember at the annual meeting, there's a couple of things you guys said. One of which we'll get to later on, which is on the time clock behind me, the sand timer. But it's really, really important to me to sort of to touch upon the fact that money to you guys and time is such a, you'll take time all day long over money. And we'll get to that in a little bit about something you said, which I thought was really, really poignant. But let's talk a little bit about what your vision was when I first met you back in 2011. Chris and Marty, I know you're on board with this. You said, and again, it's hard to quote exactly, but I'll paraphrase. I plan on working 6 months out of the year in my practice that I'll have with my brother, and then he'll work 6 months out of the year. And when I'm not working, I'll go do mission work. And when he's not working, he'll be able to spend it with his family doing his thing. And I'm going to travel with a boat. And I was like, who is this crazy guy? And so let's explain now to everybody. I'll start with you first, Marty, if you don't mind, and then we'll come back to you, Chris. How is your life throughout the year in terms of what you do and how you do it?
So it depends on the year. Like right now, and for Chris as well, we both just had kids. So his is 9 months old, mine's 1 month old. So that changes a little bit for me. Not so much Chris. He still goes and does everything with the 9 month old. But we're around home a lot more this year because of that. We didn't go on a big trip. Last year we went all the way up to the Arctic Ocean. I have a van. It's a Ford Transit van that I built out to be an adventure van. And well, we do that. We go on adventures. We've been all over the East Coast, West Coast, and the North Coast, kind of seeing everywhere that we can see on the North American continent. And it's been incredible. Those trips have been amazing. The people that we see, the places we see, the experiences that we have as a family they're unforgettable, and they're priceless, really. So that's what we did a lot last year and the year before. And then this year we have our new child, and we have a new adventure. We're building a house together as a family. So we have some land. We have that under construction right now. So we go out there and work together, and that's kind of what we're doing this time with our time off. Is we're working together as a family to build a home, kind of a fun family experience.
It's amazing. And again, I'm painting a picture here for everybody listening that the more you guys talk, the more you're going to really understand what we're talking about here. But when you said you're in your van, you have how many kids now, Marty? I know the answer, but
So I have 5 kids now. On all of these trips, we had 4 kids, my wife and I, and our dog, all fitting into it. It is a high roof, extended Ford Transit van, so it's the biggest one they make. But sleeping 6 people in a van and bringing 6 bicycles and surfboards and skateboards and one wheels and stand-up paddle boards and inflatable rafts, all of that we brought with us on all of these trips. So whenever we get anywhere, whatever adventure there is to be had, we can have it. It's been pretty amazing.
yeah. So for everybody out there listening, you just heard he's an orthodontist, trained orthodontic specialist who travels with his family, 4 kids with all the accoutrements, in a Ford Econoline van with a raised roof for and you don't sleep in hotels, right?
No, we stay in the van the whole time. We have a little kitchen that I built in. I mean, I built the whole thing out myself. So we have a little kitchenette, bathroom, shower, indoor shower, outdoor shower, heated water. Everything is in there. Heated floor even I put in it just for fun. So they're anywhere between 1-2 months, longer than that, and it starts to get, everybody gets a little bit too much on top of each other, and they want to spread out. So
I
after
love
about
that.
2 months,
More than 2 months, it gets a little bit tight. Like for most of us, a week in a van with our entire family and sleeping there, what have you, it's tight. But it's a testimony to who you are. But so you'll go on the road for, let's just say, 2 months, right? Like you went to Alaska, which we won't get into the stories, but some of the stories with the tire were truly amazing, incapable of getting the kind of things you need when something breaks down. So you go for 2 months, you come back, and then you practice ortho, or you take off more time typically?
So yeah, when I get back, typically we're switching places. So then Chris takes off on his adventures, and so I just get back in the office and back to work.
It's awesome. And so Chris, your story is a little different. How many kids do you have, Chris?
I have 7 now. Yeah. 7 kids.
And you don't use a van. Your weapon of choice is a boat.
Yeah. Yeah, we got the boat over in France. I always knew it was going to be a sailboat. I didn't know it was going to be a catamaran. It took us a while to arrive at that decision and prepare for it. But and originally we were just going to get some rinky-dink, something that barely floats, to get us by. But my wife, it took a while to get her on board with that plan of
no pun intended,
the boat. Yeah. And over time she warmed up to the idea, but she wisely helped me decide that we needed a catamaran, something with a little more room for how many people we are. And I'm glad we did. It's been a really good decision. It's a really nice boat, but yeah, we got it in France, and then we sailed it across the Atlantic. First trip we ever did was crossing the ocean.
You're really, really experienced seaman, taking a boat across the 44 foot,
46, yeah,
46-foot boat catamaran across the Atlantic Ocean with your kids and wife. Did you have a captain, or it was you?
No, it was me. But for the insurance, we did have to have crew on board with us. So we hired 2 people to come with us, which was definitely not what we wanted to do. It kind of just wasn't our style to have someone on board with us. But anyway, yeah, the first trip we ever did was crossing from the west coast of France all the way over to the U.S. Virgin Islands. And then from there, we've been all over the Caribbean, made it through the canal to the Galapagos, down to Easter Island. And then many of you may probably have not heard of Pitcairn Islands, but that was probably our most remote island that we made it to. And then now we're in French Polynesia.
It's amazing. And so you do this also for about 2 months at a shot, or longer?
No, longer. So the thing with the boat is it's really expensive to get 7 tickets or 6 tickets, or actually more. It's 8 tickets right now to Tahiti, for instance, and come back. And not only that, but it takes a long time to get the boat from one place. It sails at about 6.5 knots. So that's very similar to a mile per hour, just a little over a mile per hour. So if you can imagine crossing an ocean that's 3,000 miles at
Right.
at 6.5 knots, it takes a long time.
Yeah.
So you just need a lot of time with the boat. So we usually go 3 or 4 months at a time.
Nice. And your kids, for both of you, your kids are homeschooled by you and your wife?
Yeah,
Yeah.
when we're on the trips, they are. Yeah.
Yeah, when we're on the trips, they go back to school when we come home though.
And the schools are okay with that?
For the most part, yeah.
They've been pretty good to work with. Yeah.
So how old were you guys, first of all, when the idea of this to happen occurred? Did you just wake up one day in college and said, Marty, wouldn't it be cool if we had this? Or, when you were little kids, you dreamt, well, I'm sorry for like being all over the place here, but as I'm telling the story, I remember what I wanted to say earlier. You said something at the RD meeting, which stuck with me, which was, we were poor by American standards.
Yeah.
Right, or by right, you were like, which was, if people don't know you, it's a very simple statement. Well, we were poor by American standards, but what you were saying in essence was, by American standards, we didn't have a ton of money, but we were okay for many places around the world,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so there's no way when you were little kids, and I remember you telling me the story of how you slept in the converted pickup truck with the cap on top of it, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
a piece of plywood that was built
Double
by your
decker bed
family,
right there.
right? So you took the back of a pickup truck and had a piece of plywood that was built above the bed and below the cab, so that half the family slept on top of the plywood, the other half of the family slept under the plywood, and all the shoes were left in the back.
Yeah.
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 I still remember that.
That's
So
funny.
there was no way. And I remember you said you'd bring buckets of water from wherever you were, right? You go find a hose, and like, we're talking the kind of upbringing that I would argue 99% of orthodontists did not get raised in. But you were raised happy. You were raised with love in your hearts. You weren't raised. I mean, you guys are like the most happy, content human beings I've ever met. And there's no way when you were little kids you could ever have dreamt the dream of I'm gonna. So when did that all start?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it slowly started. We had a boat. My dad had a boat for me growing up. It was a combination of having a boat and having a lot of influence on the ocean. Um, and then the fact that we moved and traveled so much. It wasn't just moving. Every summer we would travel to a new location, and we would explore as we went. And for a kid, even though it was really poor conditions, it was magic for us. We had a great time. So we developed this wanderlust as we grew up, I think. And we saw so much of the country, so much of Canada. Every summer we were in the car nonstop. And my eyes were out the window the whole time because we didn't have cell phones and video games and stuff like that. No, I wanted to see everything that passed. I didn't want to miss anything. And so that formative experience growing up, I think, really helped us. I mean, that's never gone away. That wanderlust has never gone away. But then, additionally, when we were in college, we started thinking about, how can we, what are we going to do next? What's the next level? And we had more freedom at that point. We're thinking more on a global scale. And then additionally, with our careers and everything, the plan just slowly came together little by little as we were in college. Yeah.
Yeah, the dentistry wasn't really a thought of ours until college. Not so much. We did know a dentist growing up, and he was a great guy, great family. So that did have a little bit of influence on us. And then in college, a dentist came and spoke in our Chem 101 class from Utah, and kind of opened our eyes a little bit to the fact that, I mean, those kind of professions can make decent money, and we knew that it could be a great profession for our family. So we started thinking about dentistry quite a bit more seriously at that point. We didn't know much about it though. Before dental school, I had been to a dental office like 3 times in my life. I didn't have much experience with it at all, but it seemed like a great profession.
That's such a classic Trockel story. I've been to the dentist 3 times in my life. I think I could do this.
Yeah.
So you guys, you're in college, right? Be honest. The idea of even going to college, in retrospect, as an outsider looking at your story, like why even college, right? But I get it. You kind of understood you needed to make some sort of income to live the kind of life you wanted to live. And the idea of being able to travel the world needed some sort of means, right? And that's why I said money doesn't mean much to you as long as you have enough to do what you want to do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Then
Exactly.
everything else is just extra.
Yeah.
Right?
And college was fun too. I mean,
Oh,
that was probably a big part of the decision. We started together as well as
in
my
case
older
people
brother.
don't know, we went to college in Hawaii, so it was amazing.
Yeah. So we wanted to surf more than anything, and going to college in Hawaii was a big dream since we were little kids. So
That's amazing. And best of all, since you're talking about Hawaii, I have to bring it up. You're the only person, and Marty, I'm sure there's stories like this about you. I just don't know them. But because Chris was there first, I heard a lot of the stories. You actually once answered a want ad for a job in Hawaii.
yeah.
You want to tell everybody what that job was?
Yeah, my freshman year, I was looking for a job, and they had this bulletin where they would post all the job opportunities, and I saw a wanted ad for a cliff diver. I had no experience as a cliff diver.
I love how you add, I had no experience as a cliff diver.
But it did say
we
would
thought you
train.
had.
So I felt like I had a good shot because they said they would train. And
Cliff diver wanted, will train.
seemed like a dream job for me. So yeah, we made it happen. It was great. I really liked it.
So you did, I think you said, if I remember this correctly, you did 3 shows a day, right? With 5 dives per show from 60 feet.
Yep.
Yeah. And Marty, any similar stories in terms of jobs?
Well, I actually answered that same ad with Chris. So we got the training together, but what hung me up was the backflip from height. Because I had never been comfortable with backflips. And so when they
But
had
you were
me do it
comfortable jumping from 60 feet.
Yeah, the jumping was fine. The swan dives, the front and half flips ending in a dive, those were fine. But the back flips, because I just was never comfortable with them. And when I did it from 30 feet and landed flat on my back, I was like, I'm done.
So cliff diving was not, because of the backflip was not
because of the backflip. Yeah, I've never been, I still haven't got my backflip from height yet.
Well, it's okay. I remember when we started ortho residency and we went to Gorp, and it was in Michigan, and I was with Doug, and I really didn't know Doug at the time. I'd only met him a couple of times, and we'd been in school for maybe, a few weeks before Gorp happens. And I remember everybody was canoeing and kayaking on some lake, and there was a little bridge that went over the lake. Couldn't have been but 10 feet high, 12 feet high. It wasn't like a 40, 50 foot structure. And I remember Doug jumped out, climbed out of the water, got up on the bridge, stood on the railing, and did a backflip off.
Yeah.
Again, among the two of you, I'm going to say it was only like 10 to 15 feet off the water. Okay. But I sat there and go, who is this guy? Like, this is like the most fearless dude I've ever met. And then I got to know you two. And I realized, honestly, like, there are people out there who talk a really big game, right? Before we came on air, we were talking about this Norwegian guy who did a 40-meter jump on YouTube. And your guys' response is like, yeah, that's pretty high. Like, no, that's crazy or bananas. And, we were talking about the fact that the highest you guys have ever jumped from is probably about 80 feet. And it's pretty matter of fact to you. You have a sense of fearlessness. And I say this as a compliment that's just not found in a lot of people. You have this attitude from my perspective of what the heck, might as well try, anything. I don't think there's a whole lot that really worries you. But again, it's tempered, in my opinion, with a lot of knowledge. Right? You guys I want people out there not to think that you're daredevils, right? I can't imagine that you would, never having known how to drive a motorcycle, would suddenly start jumping 30-foot, chasms. You would learn how to drive a motorcycle, you'd become good at a motorcycle, you'd feel comfortable, and then you'd go do crazy stuff and separate your AC joint on a motor, whatever. So, but my question for you is, where do you think this fearlessness came from? And do you think it played a role in your plans to do what you're doing?
Yeah, I think so. I think it simply came from growing up so close with my two brothers. I have three brothers, but two of them are very close in age, Marty and our older brother, Dale. And we just, I don't know, it's just the culture we developed as kids. We were nonstop daring each other to do stuff, and we just loved it. And so just part of the culture of our family. And I think it was enabled, not maybe encouraged, but definitely enabled by my parents. My dad, at least, they were very, from my perspective, they were very kind in letting us do these things, where I don't think most parents would let us do half of the stuff we conjured up. I mean, I was getting stitches every year since I was a tiny kid, just nonstop getting hurt all the time. That was just our culture, yeah. And then what was the second part of your question?
Well, I mean, the first was, you guys are fearless, and where did that come from? And Marty, would you agree? Same assessment?
Yeah, it was really our childhood, the way that Chris, Dale, and I, we always were pushing each other to do more and do harder things, and it really helps you grow. And I think that helped a lot with things in life to realize that you don't really need to be scared of things. You can just try, do it, do your best, and you probably can do it.
What's the worst that's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And so the second half of the question was, do you think that sort of fearlessness, that, willing to try anything, is what was really behind this whole? Because there's another part of you that I think, I would never say I know you guys as well as family, but I know you relatively well. And there's a component to both of you, which is I'm trying to phrase this properly, a remarkably driven, you think I can't do this? Let me show you, right? Like the surest way to motivate both of you is to say you can't do it. And then I've personally seen both of you kind of almost like push the crowd out of the way and go, you think I can't do this? Well, watch, right? How much of what you're doing today is a large part of the fearlessness, and also the, you know what, nobody does this, but we will. You know what I mean? The counterculture, society says we have to do X. Well,
Yeah.
We're not going to do X. We're going to do it our own way.
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with it, Marty, don't you? I think
Yeah.
I think because we failed so many times, we got hurt so many times, that through those experiences we gained confidence. We know our limits. We're extremely confident in what we feel we can do. There's plenty that we feel we can't do,
Right.
and we stay out of that. But if we feel we can do it, we have a pretty sure idea that we can make it happen. And I think that confidence is born from making so many mistakes, because we truly have.
Yeah.
There's a song that comes to mind by AJR. And one of the lyrics is, 100 bad stories makes me interesting at parties. I relate to that a lot.
It's funny because you just gave the same exact answer that my 82-year-old faculty member at the University of Washington, when I did a 3-year course on TMD and gnatology, I walked in the clinic with him one day. Jerry Schultz, may he rest in peace, amazing teacher, amazing man, very humble. And I walked in the clinic with him one day, and he was talking about some really crazy stuff, and I didn't quite understand what he was talking about. And you guys know me pretty well. I'm not afraid to ask the odd question here and there. And I said, Dr. Schultz, how do you feel so confident about doing this? And his answer to me was experience. I said, well, how do you get the experience? And he said, you make a boatload of mistakes.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. And again, I think, but there's a second component to this, and I'd love to hear from you, Marty, on this. How did you stay true to dreams? Change, right? Like very few people say, I want to be a fireman when I grow up and become a fireman. How did you guys stay true to the vision? Was the vision ever clear, like crystal clear, of what you guys planned on doing? I'm going to go on a boat, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to be in a van. Or was it a loose kind of brothers agreement, like we're going to practice together one day, and we're going to take off a lot of time, and we're just going to fill it in as we figure it out? Which one was it, Marty?
Well, it was pretty much we had talked about what we could envision as the most amazing future for us, and we wanted to have time, which was key number one. We wanted to have time, and we wanted to have enough money to be able to do the things we wanted to do with the time that we had. And that's kind of how all of it started with that intention of what was the most important to us, because we knew, like Chris had said, we didn't need a lot of money to be fine, to be happy, to have a great life. So we thought, well, we'd love to have enough and have the time to do what we want to do. That's kind of how it all started. And as it slowly developed more, like to go into orthodontics, it just became clearer and clearer that it would be possible, and then we just kept pushing for it.
So you guys just kept checking in with each other and saying, hey, we want to do this vision one day. How are we going to get there? Maybe dentistry, maybe orthodontics. If it's orthodontics, it'll be cool because we'll work this way and work this way. And it sounds like there was a recipe that at first says, I'm going to make dinner, right? And then, okay, maybe we should have some steak for dinner. Okay, if we're going to do steak, maybe, what do you think? Yeah. And just sort of, it wasn't ever written down. It wasn't ever codified in any real way, but it was always being checked in on back and forth, right? Were you measuring what you were doing at that moment in your lives along the way against the long-term vision? Meaning, were you consciously aware that this is going to bring me closer to my vision, or was it just felt natural that it was just taking you in the right direction?
I think a little bit of both. Neither of us are lazy, so we've always pushed and tried to do as much as we can do. So while we were in school, we wanted to get through that and get to the next stage, and obviously have a ton of fun while we were doing it. But it was always, what's the next step? I mean, that's kind of what it's always been.
It's amazing. And Chris, in Nashville, you said something else at the RD meeting that we ultimately got engraved on, these these sand things we had back here, and gave them out to every member in the group because, again, while you'll never see it this way, to the rest of us, it was a pretty profound statement. And it was about time and money. You want to share it real quick?
Yeah. Money comes and goes, but time only goes, which is so true. Yeah. So true.
Yeah. I mean, everybody in the room, it's such a simple statement, but we never think like that. And it sort of came to the question of, you guys could, there's no question that anybody who knows you would say that if you two said, we're going to build 17 practices for $40 million, you two would get it done. You'd figure out a way. You'd figure out a way to come together and make it happen. But you didn't. You chose to travel the world, by boat. You chose to travel the country in land masses on a car or a van because you made it clear that money was only a means to more time. Right?
Right.
And so, right, because to you guys, the biggest commodity you have, and you said it earlier, Marty, is the time with those you love. And so it truly is admirable. And I don't know many orthodontists who've really put their money where their mouth is. People will say, I'll work less days per year, but I'll increase my production per day so I can really make more money, right? If your production dropped by 25% next year, but it meant spending, you figured out a way where you could each spend an extra 25% with your family. Is that a trade-off you take?
Yeah.
Not even a pause. Not even a question.
Not even a hard question.
which again, I think you guys understand it's a unique approach to most in our field. Right?
Yeah.
Like we all talk about, well, I don't need any more money, right? But if you're already making, $700,000 a year, it's really easy to say that. But I remember the days, Chris, more with you than Marty, just because we were talking about it more, that you were scrimping and saving every literal penny you had to go buy this boat, to save towards a boat. And the one thing we haven't talked about is what you do with the boat, because it's not just taking your family around the world on a boat. You want to take 2 seconds just explain to people what you do with this boat?
Sure. Yeah. The dream for us with the boat was to get to some of the most isolated islands that there are, because you can't get to these islands in any other way other than by boat. And there's usually no ferry. There's no other kind of transportation to get there. You have to have your own boat to get there. But they never get doctors, they never get dentists, they never get important goods coming in because of this. So they live, a lot of them, in a very restricted environment, especially with healthcare. And so being in the position we are as trained dentists, it's a phenomenal opportunity to step into these cultures who really have this need and be able to give them something. And it's so much different than just visiting them, because you're instantly part of them, part of their culture. They accept you instantly when you offer service like that, and you get to know them in a way that you couldn't in any other way. And this was an important part of our plan, or our dream, because with as many kids as we had, we wanted to instill in them a sense of both being grateful for what they have in the country that we live in, but also developing charity inside of them. So the whole service part of this is the most important part of all of it, for sure.
Because your kids help with the delivery of care.
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody pitches in, right?
Yep.
Including your pregnant wife is kicking in. I mean, everybody's.
That's right.
I just want to say, I'm giving a shout out to both of your wives, because I know them personally, and you have amazing spouses.
That's the big part
truly,
of it,
the word amazing is overused. Your spouses are amazing, not just because they put up with you, which, again, for the two of you, me and Doug, are I'm another level different. But the fact that our wives put up with us at all is like a miracle to begin with. But for those who don't know you, and I'm not trying to be sycophantic here to just kiss up to you guys, your families are really models for what I think most of us want our families to be like. Your kids are amazing kids. You were at my house recently with your oldest, Chris, and I'm just walking around, and there's your son sitting in my office. And most of the time, the office is off limits. You don't have guests come over. He's sitting in the office just with a guitar by himself, just playing, just having fun. And I won't share the story, but when I asked him, what's your favorite moment about being on the boat? He just shared like instantly this intimate, personal moment for himself on the boat. You're doing things so well with your families and your spouses. And I just had to take a second there to give them a shout out, because.
Thanks, Glenn. Yeah, appreciate that.
No, I mean it. And I know I mean it. It's just, we all want the freedom you have, but the fearlessness isn't there to pull the trigger. And let's be honest, not everybody's cut out to travel the world by boat. Not everybody's cut out to be in a van traveling around the country. And I'm sorry, Marty, you were going to say something. I apologize for cutting you off.
Oh, no, don't worry about that. I was just going to talk about how Chris and them, they just went to the Pitcairn Islands, and they were able to have a pretty neat experience there. They have a really big need of dentists there, and they've been having a hard time getting anybody to go there to get them the dental work. There's only, I think, 34 inhabitants of the Pitcairn Islands. It's the most remote inhabited island on the planet. But they have the need. They have a dental clinic, and so Chris and I were trying to figure out a way to be able to get out there on a yearly basis, at least, to get them some dental care. And that would be a pretty awesome experience for them, and well, for us, not for them. It'd be great for them because they'll have the service, but it'd be an awesome experience for us. So we're trying to make that happen for them as well.
I'll come along if you need helpers.
All right.
Let me know, man.
You have the experience. I'm just an orthodontist trying to be a general dentist.
I don't know if I know how to pick up a handpiece anymore. I know I can give a good block. I'm good there.
There you go.
But seriously, I'm down if you need me to go. And it wouldn't be time with the Trockel brothers if I didn't ask the following question. I'm going to ask each of you, and I'll pick on one of you individually at a time, to share if you can think of one, and I'm sure you have many, your favorite. Well, I would ask you for the one most memorable moment you can think of on all the travels you've had with your family, if you can come up with one. And the second would be the one moment where you were the most scared during that, because I know you guys, again, I know you, but the people listening generally don't. And if Marty and Chris are scared, something's really going bad fast. It's not like, oh, check out the tornado 400 yards away. That'll get them a little bit nervous. Hey, by the way, there's a grizzly bear with her cubs 50 feet away. Kids, just don't go near her, right? Like, I want to know the moments that where like you really got nervous about the situation we're in. And also, so we'll start with that one. And then the one most memorable moment you can come up with on your trip. And so, Marty, we'll start with you. Any moments you can think of that were just really, really like, wow, how did I end up here?
So this was a couple years ago. We were traveling the East Coast, and we were in Watkins Glen in New York, upstate New York area. Gorgeous place. If anybody hasn't been there, it is so amazingly beautiful. We were going on the hike up to the Glen, up the river. But it's like a, how to describe this? It's a ravine of tons of waterfall after waterfall, and you can hike up the trail along the side of it for a long time, and it's just beautiful place. We hiked up. We were on our way back, and while we were on a pretty mellow area where there wasn't a big drop off, my kids were up on the rock wall, hiking on that instead of on the path, and I was fine with it because there was. I mean, if they fell off, it would have been like a 4 foot fall, nothing, no big deal. And we let them know just when it gets to be a bigger fall, like when it's, a 30-foot fall off that, don't be walking on that. And so we let them know that, and we kept walking. We were walking back. We stopped at a fork to figure out which way we needed to go. We were looking at the map, and all of a sudden we hear my youngest boy, Kelvin, we hear this scream off in the distance. And, well, that'll get your heart going right then. So I start running down the path as quick as I can, trying to see where he is, if he's hanging off the edge, or what's going on, because he screamed to get one other time, and then it was just silent. So I'm going down. I get to this area where there's the rock wall, like it's like a railing kind of, but it's a rock railing, and I look over the edge of that, and I see him in the water swimming to the edge. So I quickly go down further, jump over, pull him out. And then he showed me where he had fallen off. And it was truly a miracle that he was fine, because where he fell off, if he had fallen off a foot further to the left or to the right, well, not a foot, like 3 feet to the left or 3 feet to the right, he would have landed on rocks. And it was about a 25-foot drop for a little 5-year-old, 6-year-old at that time. And that was probably the scariest moment right there.
It's a tough question, but I think the time I was most nervous was when we were in the Canary Islands, just setting sail towards the U.S. Virgin Islands. And it was nighttime, and the weather looked good. I was looking at my weather app, and the resolution of the weather is only so good. But as I zoomed in, everything looked okay. The wind didn't look too terribly strong. The clear skies, everything looked all right. So we hoisted up our big, the equivalent of a spinnaker, which is a gigantic sail that goes in front of the boat and catches a tremendous amount of wind. It's 195 square meters in size. And we're cooking along, and we made a slight course change to go in between a couple islands, and all the wind got funneled between these islands. And this is a lack of experience, not recognizing what was about to happen. And as we pulled in between these islands, and the wind came on tremendously strong. That sail is only rated for about 20 to 25 at the max knots of wind, and the wind jumped up to 35 out of nowhere. And with the big sail out like that, when the wind's that strong, you really can't get it down. There's not a lot you can do. We were going dead downwind, and the waves were so big, we're surfing down them. We hit 22 knots on a catamaran, which for our catamaran, that's really fast. So fast that as you're coming down the waves, the nose of each hull would go under the wave in front of us. And that's when I started to get nervous, because if you dive too deep, then you can cause major problems. You can break your rig, flip your boat, all kinds of stuff like that. So there's nothing we could do. We couldn't turn to the right. You couldn't turn to the left, because then you expose yourself to broadside to the wind. All you could do was run and try to get the sail down. And so we did. We tried our best to get that sail down, and ended up wrecking the sail, but we got it down. But it was scary. Yeah, it was pretty intense. It was like putting a dragon in a cage. I mean, we'd be pulling on the lines to try to bring the sail in, and we would anchor ourselves onto the deck with these anchors, and it would instantly, out of nowhere, just pull us 10 feet up off the deck, and our anchor would pull us back down. And there was 4 of us out there just trying to wrestle this thing. It was crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
War zone.
I honestly thought your story, Chris, was going to be about the whales attacking propellers. Because I remember
Oh, yeah.
when you were talking about crossing, I think it's off the coast of Spain, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, yeah.
There was a period
Right.
of time where killer whales, right,
Yep.
were basically ramming boats and eating propellers and keeping
Yeah.
people, basically keeping them adrift, because with no propeller and boats being smashed. And that was one of the few times when I've talked to you about your trips that I felt like there was some real, I wouldn't call it fear, but trepidation a little bit about, I don't know what I'm going to do here. I haven't
Yeah.
done it yet. We don't know how to get there. But I'll stick with you, Chris. The most memorable moment of all the travels you've had with your family.
Yeah, I think that's a really hard question, but one of the most memorable was in the Madeira Islands. We went on a hike up above the clouds, and Madeira is really interesting because it has 5,000-foot mountains, and of course goes down to the sea, and that difference in elevation is not over a long stretch of land at all. So it was neat to be at the sea in the morning and then climb up to 5,000 feet and be above the clouds. And the trail system they built there is incredible. And we just had a glorious experience up there. Yeah, it was wonderful.
It was probably last year. We had just gotten back from our 5-day drive on the dirt road going up to the Arctic Ocean. We got on the paved road, and that felt so nice to be on a paved road again. We were driving back down to get to Whitehorse, a little town up in the Yukon, and then I found a nice little pull off because we just wanted to relax. Pulled over, had a little campfire, made some s'mores, went to bed, and checked the Stargazer app I forget what it's called, not Stargazer, where it shows you the Aurora Borealis and its activity. We checked it in the van at about 1 a.m. and it was on fire. It was showing a really good activity. So we got all the kids up to see the Northern Lights, and they were just dancing across the sky for like an hour. It was such an amazing, beautiful experience. Nice, relaxing evening. It was awesome. It was a pretty amazing day.
That's amazing. Yeah, who needs more money, right? Like when you hear the stories and you understand what's going on, again, I applaud both of you for your fearlessness, because you've done something that the overwhelming majority of us want, but I will say are too fearful to have ever pulled the trigger, right? Because what if? How can I? How is this possible? You've answered those questions together ahead of time, right? We can do this. We'll figure it out. We'll solve it. Because the most important thing to remember is that money comes and goes, but time only goes. And you guys, time is your commodity. Time with your family is your commodity, and you made it happen. And again, the whole point of this whole thing is because when I first met you, that's what you said you wanted, and 13 years later, I mean, that's exactly what you're doing.
What's remarkable to me, Glenn, is that I can mention these little stories to you 13 years ago, all these little stories, and you remember every detail. It's unbelievable.
Now, just don't tell my wife that I remember this, because she's going to wonder why I always buy the wrong stuff at the supermarket. But I appreciate it, Chris, because you too, Marty, and you, Chris, you're both such a quiet inspiration to me. Again, it may be hard to believe, but you have so much fearlessness, which is truly something I covet. And at the same time, I've been there more than a few times. And it's I think a really good part of the story is that when you don't know something, your ego doesn't keep you from saying, "Hey, I don't know." And I've seen you, when it comes to business, come to me and, "Hey, Glenn, I was thinking I want this or that or whatever it might be," and you're not really sure what to do, and you say, "Hey, I was thinking, what should I do here?" Right? And because people here might be listening and thinking, you're the guy who has all the answers, you know everything. No, you have the answers for certain things because you made bad mistakes. You made experiential mistakes, and you learned from them, and it got better. And that's the lesson here: is find out what's important in your life, create a goal to achieve it. Don't compromise on that goal. Be fearless in your pursuit of it. And don't be afraid to ask questions when you don't know the answers. And I think both of you embody every one of those remarkably well, which is why I'm just so thrilled you were willing to come on here and really bear a lot of private, personal stories that others can learn from you. So thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Looking forward to, I can't say honestly that I'm going to be on a Marty Trockel van adventure anytime soon. There's no number 2 in the van, by the way, everybody. You need to know that. There's no number 2. You can go number 1. Number 2, you're waiting for the gas station. That's just the way it works. But the boat, you know me, I'm a water baby. I grew up on the ocean. I'm just waiting for the day where I can join you on that thing.
Yeah. Looking
Dentistry
forward
or
to
no
it.
dentistry, I'd love to be a part of it. And so,
Should be great.
yeah, until I see you at the next RD meeting or wherever that may be, I just want to say thanks again, guys, for being here. And I know a lot of people are going to get some great life changes because of what you talked about here. So what I'm going to tell everybody before I say goodbye to them is take their story, take it to heart, choose one thing in your life that you're afraid of pulling the trigger on, and then ask yourself the questions that Marty and Chris Trockel would ask themselves, which is, what's the worst that could happen, right? And that really is, I think, the overall key here is, what's the worst that's going to happen? And I think that's guided you guys really, really well along the way.